So if you had to say what the most important overarching lesson of the entire Torah is, not just for Jews, but for humanity, what would you say? It's a question. If you had to say what the most important overriding teaching in the entire Torah is for all of humanity, what would you say? Yes, Lainey Pressman. Good. Love your neighbor as yourself. Great. Betty, were you going to say the same thing? Okay, I'm moving to quadrant 2. Oh, I've got quadrant 5 up there. Merle Branner, yes. Interesting. Responsibility to make the world a better place. Any other guess? Yes, Gabe. Okay. So the diversity of humanity. Okay, great. And how about anyone dare from the 5 folks in this quadrant? Cantor? To love your neighbor as yourself. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. I got Jacob in the back. So yeah. Tikkun olam, make the world a better place. These are all fantastic ideas. But maybe it's something else. So consider for a moment that this is the week in which we start the Torah over again. Having completed our ancestors' journey from slavery to freedom, we closed our story with a new generation of leadership standing alongside our ancients on the precipice of entering the Promised Land. Their story will continue into Nevi'im, into the books of the prophets, but we won't go with them. Instead, we will roll all the way back to the beginning to tell the same story over again, just like we do every year. And of note is that when our story begins, it isn't a Jewish story yet. As you may or may not know, the Torah doesn't get Jewish, as it were, until its 3rd week of its annual reading, when we encounter a man named Avram and a woman named Sarai, who become the first Jews, Avraham and Sarah. But when we meet our earliest ancestors, the first generations of humanity, they are that and that alone, human. And this gives us the opportunity to begin from the widest, most expansive, most inclusive frame we could have. And it is in this very first portion of the Torah, the one we read this week, Parshat Breshit, that we're offered what I'd like to suggest is not only the overriding construct for the entire structure of Jewish life, that it births from the time of Torah still through to today, but perhaps even more importantly, we are offered the most important construct for the entirety of human life, regardless of one's religious persuasions or any other particularity. But take heed, because this lesson doesn't come in some idyllic telling of the beauty of God's creation, but rather in the form of its distortion, in the significant failures of God's greatest creation, humanity, as modeled for us by the first generation of our people, our human people, Adam and Eve, and their children, Cain and Abel. Let's examine each story just briefly. First, Adam and Eve. What is their sin? Tree of life, right? Or tree of good and evil, eating of the forbidden fruit, something like that? Not exactly. Listen to the text itself. What? Not listening to God. Also, good guess, not exactly. So here's the text. When the woman saw that the tree was good for eating and a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable as a source of wisdom, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave some to her husband, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they perceived that they were naked, and they sewed together fig leaves and made for themselves clothing. They heard the sound of God moving about, and the man and his wife hid from God among the trees of the garden. God called out to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" The man replied, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And God said, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman you put here with me," this is how it always goes, "she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it." Then God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" And the woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." And it is here that God then begins God's punishment of Adam and Eve and the serpent. So the issue turns out to be, if you listen carefully, not the actual eating of the fruit, but rather the fact that Adam and Eve both play the blame game. They deny any personal responsibility for their actions. They literally and metaphorically hide behind the vegetation in the garden, behind each other, behind their words. And the result is the exile of humanity from a place of perfection out of Eden forever. And it is this descent of perfection to a flawed existence of humanity that devolves further and quickly into the descent of human morality with Adam and Eve's sons, Cain and Abel, and what will become the first murder. Listen to these words after God accepts Abel's offering over Cain's. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then God said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" God said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to you from the ground." The issue here is not just that Cain denies personal responsibility. As Rabbi Jonathan Sacks so aptly points out in his commentary on this week's Parsha, he denies moral responsibility. In effect, he asks why he should be concerned with the welfare of anyone but himself. Why should we not do what we want and have the power to do anyway? Note that in both cases, God, who knows what has happened, enters into the conversation with the liable parties, not with a declarative statement of a punishment, but rather with the very same question: where? Where are you to Adam and Eve, and where is your brother to Cain? Why would God, the all-knowing, all-powerful God, do this? Because perhaps it is in this question, and this one alone, that crystallizes for us all the ultimate weakness of every human being. That seemingly by our nature, we are quick to take credit for the good we do, but we run and hide from the bad we enact. This was the reality way back then, and you don't need to look further than the headlines to know that this is the reality still today. Martin Buber expresses it this way: God does not expect to learn something God does not know. What God wants is to produce an effect in us which can only be produced by such a question, provided that we allow it to reach our heart. We hide to avoid rendering accounts, to escape responsibility. Every person hides for this purpose. To escape responsibility for our life, we turn existence into a system of hideouts. The question is designed to awaken us and destroy our system of hideouts. It is to show us to what pass we have come and to awaken in us the great will to get out of it. Everything now depends on whether we face that question. Isn't it interesting that this critical lesson comes to us just about 2 weeks after we conclude the High Holy Days, where the entire purpose is personal accountability? Our Jewish year ends with the message that we are responsible for our actions, that Yom Kippur does not atone for transgressions of one person against another until the one takes responsibility for whatever they did to the other. The gates close, we fill ourselves up with break-the-fast bagels and kugel, Maybe we go shake a lulav. And just when we think we deserve a responsibility reminder reprieve, Jewish tradition says, not so fast. I never cease to be amazed at how intuitive about the human condition Judaism is, because it knew we would go right back to hiding, to the shirking of responsibility that comes so easily to us, because there's nothing more human than that. The cycle of our Jewish year is fascinating, it's purposeful, and it is not at all serendipitous. It was planned less as a way of marking time and more as a way to live our lives, to guide our souls, at once grounded in the reality of the human condition, but also with aspirations to growth and improvement of our characters all the time. To be sure, there are abundant examples surrounding us that might make us question the point of our own taking of responsibility, when so many abnegate their own accountability and seem to get away with it. But at the end of the day, each of us remains accountable for our own lives and our own actions, nevertheless. Sachs again. God gave us freedom, but with freedom comes responsibility. God teaches us what we ought to do, but God does not do it for us. God acts through us, not to us. The great question to which the life we lead is the answer is, which voice will we listen to? The voice of desire, as in the case of Adam and Eve, the voice of anger, as in the case of Cain and Abel, or the voice of God calling on us to make this a more righteous and gracious world. As we embark upon this opportunity once again to tell our story, each of our own and all of ours together, may we choose the voice of the latter, each and every one of us, each and every time. Shabbat shalom.